Hi, I'm Ernie.
And I'm Ben.
And this is Budget Nerds.
What was all in your mind?
You are not alone.
No, you are not. Friends, welcome back to another episode. As always, it's fantastic to have you here. Today, Ben and I are talking about tracking versus YNABing. What's the difference?
Yeah.
And the reason we want to talk about this is because we hear it all the time in the community. Folks will get 6 months in, 12 months, 2 years in and realize, oh my goodness, I haven't been YNABing. I've only been tracking my expenses. And so we just wanted to kind of do a full episode because we've touched on it at numerous times. It's always coming up, but we wanted to do a full episode diving into this topic.
Yeah. And I did a Instagram live about this a while ago. Like I look on Instagram, it said 35 weeks ago as of recording. So it's like almost a year. Because I was like, I watched it again to prepare for this episode, and I was like, I don't remember any of this. I was like, it was like I was watching like somebody that wasn't me talk about something. You know, I was like, oh, that's a really good point. And I was like, you know what I mean? Like I just didn't remember anything. And I remember what was going on then. I think the reason why I did the Instagram live on this topic was because I was talking to a friend of mine, and they were like, well, they're like, I feel like we need a budget. It was actually a couple, and one was like, I feel like we need to budget. That's the word they use. And I was like, what? Like, I know you use YNAB. They use YNAB. I was like, what do you mean you don't budget? They're like, well, we need like spending limits. And I'm like, what is going on? Because the guy in the couple is like a good friend of mine, and he's like super into it, right? He loves YNAB, and he's like, yeah, he talks about it all the time. And so I was like, what's going on? And so I met with one of them, and basically what they showed me was they were using YNAB, but they were just like leaving everything up and ready to assign and just tracking, and then filling all the overspending at the end of the month, and then putting the rest into savings. So they weren't using YNAB, like they weren't using the method, right? But they were using the software.
Yes.
And so they love the software, but like they weren't using the method. And so I talked to them about it, and I don't think they ended up doing it, but there were a few things that they changed, but they didn't end up like allocating ahead of time, which is what I was trying to get them to do. But you know, it's cool. It's fine. We're still friends. So
It's a journey.
It's a journey. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of people doing that in YNAB, or a lot of folks that don't use YNAB and like track things on a spreadsheet or some other software, you know, and they feel like, oh, I'm good. Like I've done the money management thing because I'm keeping track of my spending.
Yep.
And that's good. Like, I think it's a really good starting point, but it's not YNABing, you know, it's not going the next step. Right. And I think there's a lot of benefits to miss out on. So that's what we want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is nothing wrong with tracking.
Yeah.
You know, like it is a starting point. And I just want to make that very clear. So there's no guilt here, no shame. If you're currently tracking, you're like, oh, I'm not YNABing, like no big deal.
Yeah.
Right. But there are other steps, like ways that you can level up and even gain more control of your money. But that was the starting point for me. It was tracking. It was a spreadsheet in Google. And I tried some other apps at the time as well. But it worked for a little bit because it gave me awareness that I didn't previously have.
Right.
So I started gaining an understanding of here's how much I'm paying for bills and groceries and eating out and all these things. But I did that for many years and didn't see a whole lot of progress. And I think that's the limitation of just tracking your expenses. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it does provide a lot of benefits because it can change your behavior because, you know, you get some of the software out there. I remember before I used YNAB, I get like a pie chart at the end of the month and it'd just be like, hey, you massively overspent on dining out again. try better next time, I guess. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that can change your behavior because you might be more mindful of like, okay, yeah, I set this limit and I way exceeded it. So I do want to cut back. But there's a lot of reasons why I feel like the feedback loop is too far. You know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, well, I'm looking at what I did 30 days ago or 60 days ago. And it's like, there's nothing you can do about it. It's done. And it can help you change your behavior over time, but I don't think it's as powerful as actually allocating your money and YNABing, right? So that's
that
huge.
feedback loop, that's interesting. And I think that's a really good point, because when I remember tracking spending, I would kind of watch the numbers throughout the month. Actually, I was very diligent with tracking the spending, daily and weekly. And so I kind of knew where the trends were going every single month. And I'd be like, all right, let's try a little bit harder. But that would last for a day, maybe a week at most. And then it would fade.
Yeah, because inevitably with these tracking things, like you're focused on the bookkeeping and you're not focused on how it's actually affecting your behavior until you look at a graph later. Because if all you're doing is tracking, you don't really get any benefit from the data until you aggregate it later and look at some kind of reporting tool, But with YNAB, you're looking at it every day, and you actually have, because you made a plan ahead of time, because you allocated the money and assigned it to all these categories, that feedback loop is much shorter. It's more like, oh, I need to cut back on dining out tomorrow because I'm outpacing my allocation for the month, instead of like, and you're making a future decision with money that you actually have, instead of like, oh, I need to do better generally. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's a lot less wishy-washy,
And at the end of the day, it all comes down to, at least for me, results. And I just didn't get results with tracking. We created new debt. We were stuck in that debt cycle. It was really tough to save. A lot of times when we would put money aside, we'd end up pulling it out to cover something that we hadn't thought of. And we were running that checking account balance down to practically zero at the end of every single month. So we were just stuck in that paycheck to paycheck cycle. So I did all of this diligent tracking, had a handle on the finances, but hey, there's no actual results here. Yes, maybe we're in a slightly better place than we would be if we weren't doing any tracking, but
for sure,
I'm looking for a night and day type difference here, and I just wasn't getting it with tracking.
Yeah. And if that's how you start your YNAB journey or your money management journey in general, I think it's fine. I mean, I even tell folks, the pastor at my church, I go to a pretty big church. There's like 500 people in the service, and my pastor says, Ben Barlow over there works at YNAB and he'll coach you.
Whoa.
I'm like, calm down. So I've actually coached a lot of people, and I do it for free because since I work at YNAB, it's a conflict of interest to charge for that. Anyways, I've worked with a good amount of people, and I love doing it. It's fun, but but I have said a few times with some people that are as I'll sit down and be like, how much do you want to allocate for groceries? And they're like, they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, I get it, because if you haven't been doing anything, you have no idea, So if you track so sometimes I've told them hey, maybe you take a month or two and just track it. And see where you end up, and then we can meet again, and you can actually start to change it. So you probably started with a really good place. I started with a really good place as well, because I've been tracking at least, and so I actually had a number that I could work with to start, and it wasn't a total guess, So that's probably powerful.
Absolutely, yeah. And then even in those first, I'm gonna get the time frames all wrong here, but man, maybe up to the first 2 years of YNAB.
Right.
I think a lot of it was just tracking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough to completely remember with clarity.
Well, it's kind of a spectrum. There are levels to this too. I mean, what we're talking about here is you're just not allocating your money. You don't have a system where you are maybe not even, well, you could be setting spending limits, because that's what I was doing before YNAB. I was using Mint. I'd set spending limits, but I wasn't doing like an envelope system, which like YNAB, where you're actually allocating every dollar, give every dollar a job, right?
Yep.
But then there is a little bit of a spectrum where like you might allocate like some of your money, but not all of it. That's a big thing too. Where you're kind of tracking and also doing a little bit of YNABing, but not both, you know?
Yeah, I think part of it too is you could also be allocating every single dollar, but you're doing it backwards and forwards, right? You get paid and you fill up categories that are overspent.
Right.
Because you did all this spending before that money actually landed.
Yeah. And you didn't actually look at your plan as you went, didn't make adjustments as you go. That's the Find the Money First episode that we talked about just a few weeks back, right? So that's one thing too. It's like there's a spectrum here. But yeah, okay, so I think everybody understands what we mean when we say tracking spending. What do we mean when we say YNABing then? Like what's the difference?
Well, like you said, it comes down to the YNAB method.
Yeah.
And specifically, it's probably all of the rules, all of the habits, but I'm thinking especially habit number 1, give every dollar a job, where before you even spend a penny of that money, you are allocating it forward, right? This is how I'm going to spend this money, and assigning it down to 0 all the way or throughout all your categories.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the big difference. Instead of just spending how you want and then tracking it and seeing how you did in the past, it's planning ahead. And then the tracking is more like if you're just tracking expenses in order to get a pie chart, you know, the tracking is the thing. Like that's why you're tracking. Like you're tracking so you can that's it. You're done, right? But when you're YNABing, the tracking is a service to the allocation that you made. It's a service to keeping track of the category available amounts so that you can use those available amounts to make decisions. It's more about keeping the plan up to date, your categories up to date, so you can make real-time decisions about how you're going to spend instead of looking back, right? So so I think what's confusing here is we say like, oh, don't just track spending, but like you're like, YNAB's all about tracking spending. Like that's, and honestly, that's mostly what you're doing. Like probably like I don't know, it's more than 50% of the time you're tracking when you're doing actions in the app, right?
Yeah.
You only allocate really when you get paid, and then when you need to cover over spending or when you need to change the plan, right? And that's not as often. And so you might be like, well, hey, like, Ben, why are you so mad about tracking? Because YNAB's all about tracking. It's more about why are you tracking? Is it tracking just to get a report and see how you did, or is it tracking to keep the categories up to date so you can make real time decisions based on those categories? It's really like a difference in motivation there, right?
Yeah, and it's the size of the pie that you're working with, right? In my mind, when a person is tracking, they have a general sense of here's my monthly income. Mm-hmm. And so they're spending with that number in mind. But with YNAB, when you're YNABing, when you're really implementing rule number 1, give every dollar a job, that pie is much smaller because you're not forecasting the future paychecks.
Oh, that's true too.
You're working with the money that you have right now.
Yeah.
And so I think it brings those priorities even clearer into focus. Like, here's really what my money needs to do until that next paycheck lands.
Yeah, that's absolutely a key piece too, because even when you're tracking, I think you're really thinking about your forecasting, and you're thinking if you set like spending limits, you're not basing it on your current money at all. You know, it's just like in a time frame, I want to spend this amount. You know?
That bank balance becomes irrelevant almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's a few things that happen when you allocate ahead of time that don't happen when you're just tracking. And I think you've got to it already when you're talking about priorities, Ernie. Like it's all about trade-offs. Like, again, I think we have another episode of you. I feel bad every time I reference an episode because I feel like I'm like force somebody to put something in a description somewhere. But you guys have Google. Like, come on, you can search it. Because we always forget. Like, we say, oh, we're going to put this description, and then we don't. I feel like every YouTube they always have that problem. Like, you ever like watch a YouTube video, they're like, oh, we'll put this description. You get there and it's like not there. And it's like,
what are you doing?
Yeah, but I
we
get
do it all
now
the time
because it's just like not a part of the process that's like captured. Anyway,
yeah,
we need to make some systems. Anyway, so we had an episode. I think it was called YNAB is all about trade-offs, right?
Yep.
So when you actually, so if you're tracking, you're just spending how you want, and then seeing what happened, right? If you're planning, if you're allocating your money to particular categories ahead of time, and crucially, working with the real money that you actually have, when you allocate it, you are being really aware of the trade-offs. You say, okay, if I want my money to do this, that means my money can't do that. I'm saying yes to this, which means I'm saying no to that. And I understand why people kind of balk at this a little bit sometimes, because if you don't actually decide, you have infinite possibilities on how you can spend your money. And it almost feels like you have more money in some ways.
Absolutely.
Because you can spend, we talked about this all the time, you can spend $1 like 3 different ways, right? So it's like you have $3, right? And but then when you actually allocate, it all collapses into one possibility, and you're like, okay, I'm excited about the thing I chose, but I'm also kind of mourning the things that I said no to at the same time, and that's like, that can be painful, right? But it has all sorts of benefits because you actually know what you want out of life. And if the money goes there, that's just evidence. That's what I want out of life. That's my priority, right?
Yeah. When you are allocating money before you actually spend it, you're running up against those limits. Like, they hit you square in the face a lot earlier than if you were just tracking your spending, right? Like you said, the possibilities seem endless when you're not considering the money that you have right now. And a lot of times when we hit those limits, it feels like restriction. It's like, oh, I don't have as much money as I thought I did, as much fun money as I thought I did. It's discretionary income, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And that's not always a fun reality.
Yeah. But the fact is, you're going to hit that reality either way.
Right.
Because you can't get away from scarcity. Yeah. The fact is, you can't get away from scarcity. When you spend it, you're going to say no to something. But if you don't plan ahead, you have no idea what you said no to because you didn't decide. It just happened, So yeah, like, imagine you get like a windfall of $1,000 and you're like, oh man, I could spend that on vacation, or I could spend it on a new computer, or I could spend it on the lawn, like, like, I'm literally like, whenever my eyes hit, I'm like saying,
no, the lawn's a good one. I love that idea.
Yeah, that's a good one for you. So you're like, oh, it suddenly, so I said, I named 3 things. Suddenly it feels like I have $3,000, right? Because I'm not saying either this or this. I'm saying I could do this, and this. Like, I think our brains kind of do that, but when you actually put it down on paper and you say, here's what I'm going to do, and it's gone, you're like, oh, I'm going to spend it on the lawn. And that means I'm not going to spend it on the vacation or the computer. And I think at first that can be really difficult, like saying no to these things. But over time, you actually get more traction and you build the life that you actually want. You have like the best lawn in the neighborhood. Whatever floats your boat. I mean, I'm not a lawn guy, but Ernie is.
Totally.
Right. And you actually start getting traction with your money. So if you're just tracking and you're not deciding ahead of time, you're going to bump up against scarcity, but you're not going to know what you gave up. And it might have been something that you would rather have said yes to,
Man, I'm just trying to make sense of my own money journey during this episode. And
that's what we do here.
Yeah, it's like a therapy session for totally you and me. But in the spreadsheet days, like, this idea of allocating money ahead of time, I had no concept that that even existed. Like it was such a foreign concept. So when it was introduced, I didn't fully grasp it. And so as I started doing that practice, I think, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm doing it. And this is kind of cool. And maybe I see a little bit of benefits, but it really didn't set in until I had been doing that month after month, year after year. And it kept evolving, right? Until finally I was like, oh, I get it. This is what it looks like to allocate money before I spend it. I can start getting ahead now.
I'm laughing because we work for marketing on the YNAB team. We're here to convince you to use YNAB and to love it. And this is a problem we have all the time, where it's like the benefits of using YNAB are amazing, but so many of them take some time. So we have to convince you to use it for 6 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, I see people all the time that use it for 30 days and they're like, oh, this is changing my life immediately. Yep. So it's both, but yeah, it is true. I think it's because you, over the course of a year or more, you discovered what you want. And I talked about this in the Find the Money First, or maybe I don't know what. Actually, I think it was a different episode. Anyway, I'm not going to reference any more episodes, so we don't put anything in the description. I've talked about this before, where I don't really know of any other method. I don't know of any other way to really discover what you want out of life than to actually allocate money, because you can dream, you can plan, and you can think really hard about it. But when you're literally putting the money down, right? You're putting your money where your mouth is. Like when you actually allocate money, that is what you value.
Yep.
Right. And if you don't do that, if you just kind of spend and then check later, which is tracking, you don't flex that muscle of figuring out what you want. And as a result, over time, you're just kind of spinning your wheels. Like you said, the results just weren't there for you,
Yeah.
You don't really get any traction toward any big goals because you don't really know what you want. Because you haven't actually had to put your money where your mouth is, right?
Yeah. And this all changed for me. If I'm thinking actual numbers in YNAB, it changed for me when I realized I'm getting a paycheck, or I got a paycheck, and I would start allocating that money towards the overspent categories.
Yeah.
So I would basically send that money backwards.
Right.
So imagine if I got paid $1,500, 300 of that went toward to cover overspending. So now this brand new chunk of $1,500 has been dropped to $1,200. And that's the money that I would then allocate forward. So it's like I started in a deficit almost.
Right.
And
and you can never really follow Rule 4 and get a month ahead.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't able to get ahead, save, aggressively pay off debt. The list goes on. And so that's when I drew the line in the sand. And I was like, okay, we got to stop doing this. We have to stop sending our paychecks backwards.
Yeah. And notice you didn't say we need to stop overspending, because that's going to happen. That's part of it.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
But more what you did was you said, I'm going to use the current month to cover overspending. I'm going to say no to something else. And that's what it was. That's exactly what it was. Cause when you were, and I experienced this too, big time. So I'll say we. So you get the paycheck, it could go toward anything. And because it could go toward anything and it hasn't really gone toward anything important to you, you were fine with just covering some overspending in the past, right? But the moment you did that, you gave up something.
Yeah.
What did you give up? Who knows, right? Because the money was unallocated.
Yep.
You don't know what you gave up to cover that overspending. But if you cover overspending with money that you have in the current month, money that you've already allocated, you know exactly what you're giving up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if I am overspending a lot in dining out and I keep covering it with next month's paycheck, I don't have a whole lot of incentive to change my behavior, to do the hard work of making a meal plan and getting groceries and dining out a little less, because I don't know what I gave up, right?
Yeah.
Because I use unallocated money to cover it. But if I say I need to take money from my Hawaii vacation fund to cover this overspending, all of a sudden you feel the pain of like, that's what I'm giving up. I want to go on this vacation, but I'm eating it, right? Then you actually have an incentive to cut back on the overspending on dining out because you have a bigger goal. You have something you actually want more, right? But you didn't know what it was, and now you do. So that's why that I hope I articulated.
Yeah,
that. That's why it makes a difference.
I think you did, because things were clicking for me, and I'm just thinking about trade-offs. So when I was just tracking in YNAB, say I had a target in clothing for $100. And at that point in the month, maybe we hadn't allocated the $100, right? So there's $0 in clothing, but I knew, hey, with that next paycheck that's coming in 3 days, we're going to take $100 of those dollars and we're going to put it in clothing. And so when I was tracking, what I would do is be like, okay, we don't have the money in clothing, but you know what? I'm getting that money in 3 days, so we can just spend it right now. And there were no trade-offs. Like, even though the money wasn't there, I was just like, well, it will be there eventually. And it wasn't until I drew that line in the sand and said, nope, the money isn't there right now. So if I do want to buy the clothes right now, I have to get $100 into clothing. So where's that money going to come from? So then I started walking through what the trade-offs are. And that's what I would do every single time. Like, I made sure that there were no overspent categories on payday. So then when that paycheck hit, all that money could go forward, right? Here's what it's going to do in the future for us. And it just got me in the practice of making trade-offs. And you do that enough, you're going to become a master at it, right? You're going to really know, here's what's important to me. And it cuts out the fluff. It focuses on the priorities. And then that's when you put yourself in the best position possible to get ahead.
Yeah. And it'll get easier. It'll feel less painful to make that choice. And here's why. Here's why it gets easier. I think I'll just speak for me, because you have a better idea of what your values are. You have a better idea of what you want out of life. So when it comes time to make that scarcity decision where I'm making a trade-off, I can say yes to this or no to this. And you've proven to yourself over time, that this thing is important to you, and it doesn't feel so bad to put money toward that and say no to something else, because you're like, I'm aware of what I want, right? So what's the difference between tracking spending and YNABing? It's self-actualization, right? It's figuring out what you want and actually making it happen, instead of just spending however you want in the moment and seeing where you ended up. And that makes all the difference. Embracing the scarcity.
Yeah. The other thing I'm thinking about here is, we used to say this all the time. I don't know how much we say this anymore, but following the rules 1, 2, and 3, you naturally spend within your means. Right?
Yeah. Because you have to.
You have to. You give a job to every single dollar. Some of those jobs are in the future, right? True expenses. And then when priorities change, circumstances change, you change your plan. But you're always using the money that you have right now. So that allows you to spend less than what you make, because you're going to run up against limits, and that forces you to say no sometimes. And so when I'm thinking about why was I actually able to make progress, it's because every single paycheck I was living within that size of the pie. And sometimes I would spend all of it, and then sometimes I wouldn't. And that leftover then put me even further ahead with the next paycheck. And then that just started snowballing over time.
Right. Yeah, it makes a huge difference. And I want to mention it, we've already mentioned it, but I want to mention it again. If you are, some of you guys are using spreadsheets and you're like, yeah, I've just been tracking him. Maybe I should try out this YNAB thing. And some of you guys are using YNAB and you're like, I feel like I'm having trouble with that overspending going back and covering it with future paychecks, or you just feel like you're allocating the money ahead of time, but you still feel like you're still just tracking because all you end up doing is just going back and fixing overspending. The Find the Money First episode that we recently did should just be a couple episodes down in your feed. That is the solution. So check that out. There's also a blog. Just Google it. Find the Money First YNAB. It'll all come up. And that is the solution. And all that is checking YNAB before you spend. That's the bottom line. And then you go through a process. If you have the money, you spend and just do it. If you don't have the money, you can either say no to spending, or you can take that money from somewhere else, making that trade-off with your eyes wide open, right? And that one practice can get you there. If you're using YNAB right now and you're allocating ahead of time, but you still feel like you're just tracking, that'll get you there.
And it takes 10 seconds. You pull up the phone, you look at that category. And some people are like, I don't want to be,
it's like
I don't want to be controlled by YNAB. I don't want to always have to check my categories before I spend. But I look at it as freedom. Like, I know exactly where I'm at. And then once I make a decision of what I want to do, I can move forward in complete confidence and clarity. And I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it might just be like a couple categories for you that you need to focus on for a little while and then move on to another couple categories, or maybe it's even when you start like really getting into YNAB and you reconcile every day because you're a budget nerd. You start to feel the plan, you feel those categories that are just a part of you, and you'll know when you're like, I can go out to eat and I don't really need to check right now. Or you'll know I'm going to go out to eat and I think I need to double check and see if I have the money. And usually it's right about this time of the month. We're recording on February 21st when I start to run out of that. It's about this time where I'm like, I should probably. So you know what? Scratch all that. Maybe you should just check it every time, because I probably wouldn't run into this problem if I did. So true. But anyways, just checking the plan before and making adjustments in the moment instead of waiting. That's the key. And that is the difference between tracking spending and YNABing in a nutshell. It's making decisions in the moment rather than looking back and seeing how you
making
did,
decisions in the moment based on the money that you have right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's making decisions. Period. You know what I mean? It's making a trade-off decision. Whereas tracking, you're not really making decisions. You're just seeing the effects of your decisions later. Make a decision. Just make a choice, guys. Make a decision. What do you want? Again, I'm back to the Notebook. What do you want? What do you want? I need to watch it because I don't even know anything about that scene.
I've never seen it. No, I told you I'm old school romantic comedies. Like You've Got Mail, things like that.
Well, I brought it up before. There's just it's really just like a GIF, GIF, and it's just like a GIF in my head where it's just like, what do you want?
Stop thinking about what I want, what he wants, what your parents want. What do you want? What do you want?
It's not that simple.
What do you want?
Well, folks, I think we've run out of stuff to talk about on tracking versus YNABing. Would you agree, Ben? Is there anything else you want to cover?
I think we got it. I think that's all I want to say. Thanks for just listening to us figure it out as we talk, because that's what we do here on Budget Nerds. Sorry, we don't really know what we're talking about until we start talking, and you get to listen to all of it. So I appreciate you hanging in there with us.
But we can't end an episode without a couple YNAB wins.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Who's all in your mind?
All right, my YNAB win comes from Casey. Casey emailed us and says, "Hi, Ben and Ernie. I've been with YNAB on and off for the last few years. It wasn't until recently that I got rid of everything and just got a brand new budget, which included a savings category. Because of this, I was able to purchase a $50 necklace at Kohl's yesterday without even thinking about it, because I had the money there. Although I planned to use the money for vacation, it was nice to know I had a little bit of money to blow. Also, I've started getting better at looking at my budget before I spend. Folks, I swear we do not hand select these before. We just, hey, let's take the first two.
Yeah, we have a spreadsheet and we just take the first two.
Yeah, so this fits so well.
It's because we just talk about the same things over and over again.
That's true. There's just a handful of topics that YNAB covers, all personalities. Okay, also, I've started getting a little better at looking at my budget before I spend. For example, I really want to take a writing class, but it's $400. I don't mind spending the money. I'm going to see what my other options are.
Nice.
Congratulations, Casey. I absolutely love it. I hope you're still enjoying that necklace. And I love that it feels like you're making some progress here, right? You're gaining momentum. You're figuring out what those priorities are and then just aligning the money with them.
Yeah. I hope you took that writing class. If you're listening, let us know.
Yeah, this win probably came in 6-8 months ago. So
yeah, maybe you took the class. I don't know.
Let us know.
All right. I got one from Lauren. Lauren says, hello. Hello, Lauren. Back in 2018, I was at my absolute lowest. I had about $175,000 in debt between maxed out credit cards, car loan, and this is a big one, grad school student loans. There it is. Yeah. I was like, man, I don't know if you can get there with credit cards. I think they'll cut you off at a certain point. And there's like, oh, student
there we go.
As a single person, I was super overwhelmed and at rock bottom. I found YNAB in early 2019, and within about 6 months, I was hooked. I've had so many small wins throughout the years, but it's all accumulated in officially being debt-free in September 2023. So I'm doing some math. That's 5 years. Dang. Okay, that's a big deal. I did it all by myself, and although there were some sacrifices along the way, I was also still able to do things that brought me joy, like traveling. I'm so thankful to YNAB. So good. And I love that, maybe it took you a little bit longer, but you took the time to travel and enjoy yourself along the way. I almost referenced another Budget Nerds episode, but I'm not going to. So
on behalf
there's
of
one
everyone,
about debt.
thank you.
Just Google it. There's something about debt, something. You'll find it.
All right. Well, yeah, congratulations, Lauren. That's a fantastic win. And if you have a win, you can let us know in the comments of the YouTube video. Otherwise, email us directly, budgetnerds@ynab.com.
All right. If you're just tracking, try YNABing. And that's all I got to say. Happy YNABing, everybody.
See you, friends.